The Women by Kristin Hannah, a comprehensive summary. Introduction. The Women is a historical fiction novel by Kristin Hannah, published in February 2024. The story centers on Frankie McGrath, a young woman from a privileged background in Coronado Island, California. Inspired by her family's military legacy and the death of her brother in Vietnam, Frankie enlists as an army nurse. She serves 2 tours in Vietnam, facing the brutal realities of war and forming deep bonds with fellow nurses. Upon returning home, she confronts a society that dismisses her service, leading to struggles with reintegration and recognition. Part 1: Enlistment and Deployment. In May 1966, 20-year-old Frankie McGrath attends a going-away party for her older brother, Finley, at her parents' house on Coronado Island in California. Born into wealth and raised to valorize military service, Finley has volunteered to serve in the ongoing Vietnam War. Frankie feels conflicted about her brother's departure. During the party, she slips into her father's office and views his hero's wall, which contains pictures of male family members who served their country. Finding Frankie there, Rye Walsh, one of Finley's Naval Academy friends, tells her that women can be heroes in the modern world. In subsequent months, Frankie writes to Finley and graduates early from her nursing program. At her hospital job, she meets a Vietnam veteran who credits a woman nurse serving abroad for his survival. Inspired, Frankie volunteers for the Army Nurse Corps. Frankie's impulsive decision distresses her parents, who believe war is only for men. During their argument, naval officers arrive with news that Finley has been shot down in a helicopter. Mom urges Frankie to stay home, but she can see no way out of her commitment. Lit charts. Frankie flies to Vietnam in March 1967. Frankie's arrival is disorienting, and the 36th evac hospital is not the orderly facility she anticipated. Frankie has 2 bunkmates, an emergency room nurse named Ethel Flint, and a black surgical nurse named Barb Johnson. At the hospital's officers' club, Frankie meets Jamie Callahan, a handsome surgeon who comforts her during a sudden series of explosions. The next day, Frankie gets thrown into the emergency room to help with a mass casualty, Maskell. Helicopters deliver wounded soldiers with horrific injuries. Frankie feels useless, but Ethel encourages her to do what she can and learn. Frankie is officially assigned to the neuro ward, where she hones her skills under the tutelage of Captain Ted Smith. One day, she and other medical staff visit a Vietnamese village to care for locals, an initiative called Medical Civil Action Program, MedCap. Lit charts. Jamie convinces Frankie to transfer to surgery, where he mentors her. Protesters shout at her in the airport, and she has intense nightmares about Vietnam. Frankie's parents don't want to hear about her wartime experiences, and Dad has lied to their friends, saying Frankie has been in Florence. No one believes she served in Vietnam. Frankie visits Rye's father to plan a homecoming party, only to learn Rye has been killed in action. Frankie sinks into a depression until Ethel and Barb visit and remind her how much she loves nursing. She takes a hospital job but becomes frustrated with management's lack of trust in her skills. Mom forces Frankie to socialize with her old society friends, but Frankie finds she can no longer connect with those women. That same day, Frankie is fired for performing an emergency tracheotomy when there were no doctors available. The next day, Dad scolds Frankie for exposing his lie about Florence. Furious at Dad's refusal to acknowledge her heroism as a woman, Frankie destroys his hero's wall and blames him for Finley's death. Dad kicks Frankie out. She seeks help at the Veterans Administration Clinic, but the psychiatrist insists there are no women in Vietnam and tells her to forget the war. Part 2: Return and Reintegration. For the next 2 years, Frankie lives with Barb and Ethel on a farm in Virginia. By April 1971, she has found another nursing job, and her nightmares are less frequent. News of the violent My Lai massacre has deepened the public's anti-war sentiment. Nevertheless, President Nixon continues to send troops to their deaths. Barb has joined the Vietnam Veterans Against War, VVAW, and cajoles Frankie into attending a protest in Washington, D.C. During the march, Frankie is furious to learn that even veterans dismiss her service. The demonstration awakens her own anger at the government. At another protest, veterans throw their war medals on the Capitol steps. Afterward, Frankie meets Henry Acevedo, a California psychiatrist who opposes the war and asks if she has nightmares. Frankie and Barb attend a fundraiser for the League of Families, run by Navy wives whose husbands are prisoners of war. One woman recognizes Frankie from Coronado and expresses sympathy about Mom's recent stroke, which nobody had told Frankie about. Frankie returns to California to care for Mom. Dad confesses his difficulty accepting who Frankie became in Vietnam. He and Mom gift Frankie a cottage nearby. Frankie volunteers with the League of Families, writing letters and selling POW bracelets. On July 4th, Mom and Dad host a lavish party, which Henry Acevedo happens to attend. A firecracker triggers Frankie's flashbacks to Vietnam. Henry takes her home, and they start a relationship. In December, Frankie realizes she is pregnant and agrees to marry Henry despite still being in love with Rye. In January 1973, Nixon signs the peace accord, ending the war. When the first POWs arrive home from Vietnam, shockingly, Rye is among them. Frankie is devastated to learn he lied to her and is married. In her distress, Frankie miscarries the baby and calls off her engagement with Henry. To cope, she turns to alcohol and pills and withdraws from family and friends. The hospital puts her on leave for erratic behavior. Eventually, Frankie reconnects with Rye, and they begin an illicit affair. Though Rye proposes to Frankie, she discovers he's fathered another child with his wife. Spiraling, Frankie drives after taking Valium and nearly kills a cyclist. Ashamed, Frankie unintentionally overdoses and nearly drowns in the ocean. Dad places her in a psychiatric ward. From there, Frankie is transferred to Henry's clinic, where she learns many veterans are prone to addiction as a result of post-traumatic stress disorder. She begins therapy with Dr. Alden and progressively unpacks her trauma. Frankie leaves the facility in 1974 and settles in Montana shortly thereafter. Part 3. Healing and Advocacy. In 1982, Frankie has transformed her Montana ranch into a haven for women veterans from Vietnam. She attends the dedication for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., where she, Barb, Ethel, and so many others finally have their sacrifices recognized. Her parents come to see Finley's name, and Dad apologizes to Frankie, who he now understands as a hero. Observing the monument, Frankie runs into Jamie Callahan, who survived his injuries. Frankie feels proud of her service and validated to be among other veterans. Themes: female friendship and solidarity. The bond between Frankie and her fellow nurses, Ethel and Barb, is a central theme in the novel. These women form a close-knit sisterhood amidst the chaos of war, providing each other with emotional support, camaraderie, and a sense of belonging. Their shared experiences in Vietnam create an unbreakable bond that transcends their differences in background and personality. This theme underscores the importance of solidarity among women, particularly in male-dominated environments. Their enduring friendship also highlights how female companionship can be a source of strength and healing. Invisibility of women in war. A powerful theme throughout the novel is the erasure and marginalization of women's contributions in wartime. Despite risking their lives and performing critical work, women like Frankie are met with disbelief, disregard, and outright denial upon their return home. Frankie's struggle to be seen and acknowledged as a Vietnam veteran mirrors the real historical experiences of many women who served. Kristin Hannah uses this narrative to expose the systemic sexism that undervalued women's roles in history, particularly in the military. The theme is reinforced when Frankie is told repeatedly that there were no women in Vietnam, despite her lived experience. Patriotism versus disillusionment. Frankie begins her journey as a patriotic and idealistic young woman who believes in the nobility of military service. Her father's veneration of the military and her brother's legacy heavily influence her decision to enlist. However, the brutality of war and the lack of recognition she receives upon returning challenge her notions of patriotism. Her growing disillusionment with the government, especially in light of the lies and manipulation surrounding the Vietnam War, marks a turning point in her worldview. Hannah captures the nuanced reality of many veterans who feel betrayed by the very institutions they swore to serve. Mental health and recovery. The novel explores the impact of PTSD and addiction, showing how war trauma extends beyond the battlefield. Frankie's descent into substance abuse and her eventual psychiatric treatment reflect a realistic portrayal of a veteran's mental health journey. Kristin Hannah highlights the importance of mental health care and the long, painful path to recovery. Frankie's time at Dr. Alden's clinic and her later efforts to create a healing space for other women veterans emphasize compassion, therapy, and the collective power of shared healing. Family and identity. Frankie's relationships with her parents, especially her father, are complex and evolve throughout the novel. Her father's inability to accept her as a war hero reflects traditional gender roles and societal expectations. Over time, both Frankie and her parents undergo transformations. Her father's eventual acknowledgement of her service is a moving resolution to years of emotional distance and misunderstanding. The novel also explores how trauma can affect one's sense of identity and belonging, and how forging new connections can rebuild a fractured self. Historical context and realism. Kristin Hannah anchors the women in a vivid historical context, drawing from extensive research on the Vietnam War, women in the military, and the societal reactions of the time. The novel incorporates real events like the My Lai massacre, the anti-war protests in Washington, and the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in 1982. By weaving fictional characters into actual history, Hannah offers a powerful narrative that challenges the dominant narratives of the Vietnam War and shines a light on the forgotten contributions of women. The characters, especially Frankie, Barb, Ethel, and Rye, are richly drawn and deeply human, embodying the complexities of their experiences. The author's attention to detail in medical procedures, military life, and psychological trauma gives the novel a compelling authenticity. Hannah also deftly explores the cultural attitudes of the 1960s and 70s, highlighting the moral ambiguity of the war and the shifting perceptions of heroism. Conclusion. The Women is a powerful, emotionally resonant novel that elevates the often overlooked stories of women who served in Vietnam. Through Frankie's journey, Kristin Hannah pays tribute to their courage, resilience, and enduring spirit. The novel is not only a historical reckoning, but also a deeply personal tale of healing, friendship, and finding one's voice in the aftermath of trauma. It urges readers to remember that women, too, were on the front lines and their stories deserve to be heard. This sweeping narrative is both heartbreaking and inspiring, shedding light on a forgotten chapter of history and honoring the silent, steadfast service of countless women. The Women is a testament to bravery in all its forms, on the battlefield, in the hospital ward, and in the struggle to reclaim one's story against all odds.